Picture the most terrifying thing your ancestors ever saw. Not a predator, not a storm. Something that roared without a mouth, ate without a stomach, and could turn an entire forest to ash in a single afternoon. Fire. For millions of years, every animal on Earth ran from it, and so did we. It was death that moved, death that spread, death you could not fight. And then, at some point, one of our ancestors did the single most insane thing any creature had ever done. Instead of running away from the fire, they walked toward it. They reached out, and they picked it up. That one decision, to grab hold of the thing that everything else fled from, may be the reason you exist at all. So how did a terrified, defenseless ape learn to tame the deadliest force in nature? The answer is stranger and older than you think. Before we controlled fire, fire controlled the world. It fell from the sky as lightning. It burst from cracks in the earth. It swept across dry grasslands faster than any animal could run. To every creature alive, fire meant one thing: flee, right now, or die. Our early ancestors were no different. They were small, slow, and covered in flammable hair, with no claws and no fangs. A wildfire was an apocalypse. For a creature like that, the idea of walking towards the flames should have been unthinkable. And for a very, very long time, it was. But fire left something behind. After a wildfire swept through, the danger was gone, and in its place was a strange, smoking landscape full of opportunity. Roasted seeds, cooked roots, and most importantly, animals that hadn't escaped the flames, now lying dead and, by accident, perfectly cooked. Our ancestors weren't the only ones who noticed. To this day, some birds and animals deliberately follow the edges of wildfires to snatch up fleeing and roasted prey. Early humans almost certainly did the same. They learned that where fire had been, food was waiting. Fire, they slowly realized, was not only a destroyer, it was also a provider. And that cooked food was a revelation. Raw meat is tough and hard to chew. Raw roots are fibrous and difficult to digest. But food touched by fire was soft, easier to eat, and released far more energy for far less effort. A body that once spent hours chewing could now get more calories from a single cooked meal. Nobody understood the science, of course. They just knew that the food from the burned places tasted better and left them feeling stronger. That craving, that simple preference for cooked over raw, was a leash. It was pulling our ancestors closer and closer to the flames. Here is where humans did something no other animal has ever done. Every creature can flee fire. A few clever ones will scavenge at its edges. But at some point, one of our ancestors picked up a burning branch from a lightning strike, a wildfire, a smoldering log, and carried it away, still alive, still glowing. Think about how insane that is. To hold, on purpose, a piece of the thing that kills. It would have burned them. It would have terrified them. But they held on. And in that moment, fire stopped being a force of nature that happened to us. It became a tool that belonged to us. But catching fire was only half the battle. Fire is hungry. Leave it alone and it dies. So the very first fire users weren't fire makers at all. They were fire keepers. When they were lucky enough to capture a flame, they had to guard it with their lives. Feed it dry wood by day. Shelter it from rain. Carry a glowing ember, wrapped and smoldering, from one camp to the next, sometimes for days. A group's fire might have been kept burning for months, even years, passed along like the most precious thing they owned, because it was. Losing the fire could mean losing everything: warmth, safety, cooked food. The flame was a member of the tribe, and what that flame gave back rewrote what it meant to be human. Fire pushed back the predators that hunted us in the dark. Few animals will charge a wall of flame. It gave us warmth, letting our ancestors survive nights and climates that would otherwise have killed them. It gave us light, stretching the useful day past sunset for the first time in the history of life. And it gave us a place to gather. For the first time, our ancestors could sit together after dark, safe, fed, and warm, staring into the flames. The campfire became the first living room, the first theater, the first place stories were ever told. But fire's greatest gift was hidden inside our own bodies. Because cooked food was so much easier to digest, our ancestors' guts could actually shrink. Digestion no longer needed to be a full-time job. And all that saved energy went somewhere extraordinary: the brain. The human brain is a monster of an organ, burning around a fifth of all the energy we consume. Many scientists believe we could never have afforded such an enormous hungry brain on a raw diet alone. Cooking, in effect, predigested our food outside the body and fed the explosion of intelligence that made us human. In a very real sense, we did not just tame fire. Fire helped build us. For hundreds of thousands of years, though, humans could only catch fire, never create it. They were still at the mercy of lightning and luck. And then came the final, staggering leap. Our ancestors learned to make fire from nothing. By striking certain stones together to throw a spark, or by spinning a wooden stick against a board until the friction birthed an ember, humans became the only creature that could summon fire at will. This changed everything. No more desperate guarding of a single precious flame. If it went out, you simply made another. Fire was no longer a gift from the sky. It was a power we carried in our own two hands, anywhere we went, forever. So how far back does this story go? The honest answer is that scientists are still arguing about it. Clear, undeniable evidence of controlled fire, hearths, ash layers, burned bone, goes back at least 300,000 years and is widespread by then. But scattered, more debated hints stretch back much further, possibly 1 million years or more, to human ancestors before our own species even existed. What's remarkable is that our relationship with fire may be older than humanity itself. We didn't invent fire as modern humans and then thrive. It may be closer to the truth to say that fire was there in the workshop while we were still being made. Step back, and you realize fire is the invisible foundation under everything that followed. Cooking. Warmth that let us spread into freezing lands. Protection that let us sleep soundly. Light that stole hours from the night. Hardened spear tips, fired clay, smelted metal, and eventually the engines and power plants that run the modern world. Every one of them is a descendant of that first stolen flame. We often tell the story of humanity as a story of big brains and clever hands. But underneath it all is something simpler and stranger. An ape that, unlike every other animal on Earth, refused to run from the fire. So the next time you flick a lighter or turn on a stove without a second thought, remember what it once was. Remember that a version of you, hundreds of thousands of years ago, stood shaking in front of a wall of flame that every instinct screamed at them to flee, and chose instead to reach out and take it. Everything you are was built on that impossible act of courage. It makes you wonder what other terrifying thing we might one day reach out and grab hold of, and what it might make of us. Ever wondered what else our ancestors did that should have killed them, but didn't?